Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 Season 28 patch 265 Demon Hunter build guide. With the Season 28 patch, the Unhallowed Essence Demon Hunter, one of my all-time favorite builds, got a nice sizable buff. This build was already one of the best builds for farming, now it's even stronger. So I figured let's make an updated guide, and this should also apply to non-season and future seasons too. It's fast, it clears screens, and you can even push a little bit into the Greater Rifts. It's not going to be the best build for pushing solo Greater Rifts, but thanks to its recent buff, it's better than ever. The new Natalia set will probably be the best build for solo Greater Rift pushing for Demon Hunters, but there's no way it's going to outpace Unhallowed Essence for farming. So in this video, we're going to go over the gear, the skills, and the playstyle that you want to rock an Unhallowed Essence Multishot Demon Hunter. And if you want a written guide to reference, you can go to maxroll.gg and find a written guide by the Demon Hunter god himself, Wudijo. So this build obviously revolves around the Unhallowed Essence set. You're going to want to benefit from the 6-piece bonus of this set. The 2-piece makes your generators generate 2 additional hatred and 1 discipline. The 4-piece grants you 60% damage reduction and makes you deal 60% increased damage for 8 seconds as long as there are no enemies within 10 yards of you. This build is about playing keep away. Now thankfully you got an 8-second grace period, but at least once every 8 seconds you want to make sure no enemies are next to you. How far is 10 yards? It's roughly as tall as your character. Your character is about 9 yards tall. As a general rule with this build, you want to keep enemies on the edge of your screen. You just deal more damage that way. Then the 6-piece bonus. Your generators, Multishot, and Vengeance deal 1,700% increased damage. That's what the buff is this season. We'll see in final patch notes, but the 350 you're seeing right now, that's what it was pre-buff. Now this is an interesting mechanic because it rewards you for having extra discipline. So you're going to want to stack on your gear the affix that gives you plus to max discipline, plus a skill that'll give us even more. But more on that soon. Now another essential item for this build is going to be the Dead Man's Legacy Quiver. This triples Multishot's damage and makes it hit twice against enemies that are below 60% health. We're also going to use a Yang's Recurve Bow. This is another triple damage multiplier to Multishot, and Multishot is attacking 50% faster. Yang's also rolls as a primary affix up to 50% resource cost reduction. We're going to need that because if we want to be spamming Multishot, and we do, it's going to cost a lot of resource. And to help with that resource cost reduction and to benefit from it even more, we're going to work in the Captain Crimson set. 2-piece bonus gives us some life per second, gives us 20% cooldown reduction, 20% resource cost reduction, and then the 3-piece bonus increases the damage we deal based on how much cooldown we have, and decreases how much damage we take based on how much resource cost reduction we have. And in order to benefit from both the Captain Crimson's 3-piece and the Unhallowed Essence 5-piece, we're going to put in our cube a Ring of Royal Grandeur. This reduces the number of items needed for set bonuses by 1. A Ring of Royal Grandeur you're going to get from doing Act 1 bounties. You get this ring from Act 1 bounty bags, you will not get it as a random drop or from Kadala. So Ring of Royal Grandeur in your cube, Captain Crimson's belt, and then Captain Crimson's either pants or boots. If you find primal unhallowed pants, for instance, then craft the Crimson's boots. A key part of our defense will be the Wraps of Clarity bracers. Your hatred generators reduce your damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds. So we're going to want to be tapping a generator at least once every 5 seconds to maintain this buff. Similarly, we're going to take the Bastion of Will set, Focus and Restraint rings. When you hit with a resource generating attack, or primary skill, you deal 50% increased damage for 5 seconds, and when you hit with a resource spending attack, you get another 50% damage buff every 5 seconds. So this is another incentive to want to pop your generator at least once per 5 seconds. We'll round things out with a Squirt's Necklace Amulet. While you're not taking damage, the damage you deal is increased by up to 100%, but the damage you take is increased by up to 50%. We're trying to not get hit here. Again, keep enemies at the edge of your screen, and then just blast with Multishot, and when enemies get close, move the heck away. Now in the cube, we're going to want to get a Dawn crossbow. This reduces the cooldown of Vengeance by 65%. We want to maintain 100% uptime on Vengeance, and getting Dawn in the cube is a critical part of making that happen. Also in the cube, we're going to want the Visage of Goons. Vengeance gains the effect of the Dark Heart rune. This gives us more toughness. And this is because we're going to be taking the Seethe rune on Vengeance. That's going to help with our resource management. However, in Season 28, we have a new mechanic, the Altar of Rights. This is effectively a Paragon tree to earn your way through. It's a really exciting new system. We'll have a full video discussing it. We spoke about it in this old video over here, but there's one seal on the Altar of Rights called Vigor. Critical hits grant resource. Every time you crit, you're going to get 5 hatred back, and you're going to be critting at least half the time. Once you unlock this on your Altar of Rights, you can most likely drop Seethe. You should have enough resource at that point, in which case you can take the Dark Heart rune instead, and therefore free up your slot from the Visage of Goons. In this case, you can instead put in a St. Archu's Gauge pair of gloves in your cube. The first time an elite pack damages you, you gain an Absorb Shield for 150% of your max life. Now this Absorb Shield keeps your squirts buff up, as long as you are not losing health. If the damage is to your Absorb Shield, your squirts buff will not fall off. Another option for the cube would be a Pride's Fall helmet. You again, only get this from bounty bags, Act 3 bounty bags. Your resource costs are reduced by 30% after not taking damage for 5 seconds. This synergizes well with our playstyle of Squirt's Necklace. We're trying to not take damage. Now you might say, well, Rhykker, you just said we're not going to have resource issues. We're not going to have hatred issues. Pride's Fall additionally helps with our discipline. If you're doing really fast speed content, rifts or bounties, and you need to be vaulting a lot, the Pride's Fall really helps. Now I'll go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, but first we'll take a look at the skills. First, we're going to take Evasive Fire Focus. This is our generator. It shoots out on a shotgun spread, so it's easy to hit enemies with it, and 7 hatred, that's a nice amount of hatred to generate. Next, our actual damage dealer, we're going to go with Multishot, of course. But which rune? The gameplay you're seeing is with the full broadside rune. This is the physical rune, and this is the one that you would swap to for Greater Rift pushing. It deals the most area of effect damage, and when you're pushing Greater Rifts, the strategy is to really build up as high a density of enemies on screen as possible, and then just pepper them down. But for most purposes, the Fire Rune Arsenal will be your best bet. It shoots out rockets, and these really help take down Rift Guardians quickly. So when you're doing speed content, it's going to be the Rift Guardians that really slow you down. Multishot by itself is just such an amazing screen clearer that it's going to be the elites and the bosses that'll be your speed bumps. Next, we need to take Preparation Invigoration. The passive ability permanently increases your max discipline by 20. Again, you deal more damage based on your discipline, so must have essential damage buff. Next, you want to take Vault Tumble. This is your mobility skill. After using Vault, your next vault within the next 6 seconds costs less discipline. Discipline is going to be your most difficult resource to manage. Then lastly, you'll want Smokescreen Special Recipe. Smokescreen gives you 1 second of invulnerability, and the Special Recipe rune reduces the discipline cost. Now you can either save Smokescreen for emergencies, or if you're more liberal in spamming it, then you might want to get the Vanishing Powder rune instead, which reduces the cost but extends the cooldown significantly. However, if you're playing Season 28, and you are on the Altar of Rights and you have unlocked the Revelation Seal, which grants you passability, and therefore you're able to walk through enemies, then you could potentially afford to drop Vault. If you drop Vault, however, you are now losing a good amount of move speed. Vault serves 2 purposes. Get you out of danger, but also move fast. When you have passability, you can now get out of danger just by walking through enemies, but you're not going to be closing distances quickly anymore. In which case, another rune option on Smokescreen becomes Displacement. Gain 100% move speed while under the effects of Smokescreen. So if you're taking Vault out of the build, what can you swap it in with? Well, you can get Companion, Wolf Companion to squeeze out some extra damage. By itself, the Companion doesn't really do anything, but the active ability will increase your damage by 15% for 10 seconds. Personally, I prefer to keep Vault, but technically, you are going to maximize your damage with Wolf Companion. Another option would be Shadow Power, Shadow Glide. This is to gain a 30% move speed buff, and that'll last for 5 seconds. However, Shadow Power costs 14 discipline, Smokescreen costs 14 discipline. It would be difficult to run both of these. So you have your choices here between Vault, Shadow Power, and Smokescreen. Smokescreen is the most defensive button. It makes you invulnerable for 1 second. If all you care about is the speed, then getting 30% increased speed for 5 seconds is better than 1 second of double speed. So if you want to just maximize your move speed, then take Shadow Power and Vault. The best option for solo Greater Rift pushing, Wolf Companion, and Smokescreen. But again, until you get passability, do not give up Vault. As for the passives, we're going to take Cull the Weak. Increases damage against slowed or chilled enemies by 20%. This combines with Thrill of the Hunt. Enemies hit by your hatred spenders are slowed by 80% for 2 seconds. So we're taking Thrill of the Hunt to trigger our Cull the Weak. We're going to take Ambush. Deal 40% additional damage to enemies above 75% health. If you're doing bounties or rifts, you don't need that huge damage buff. Speed Greater Rifts, yes. But once you reach a point where you're overkilling content, you can swap out all 3 of these for faster passives. Before we get there though, we'll just mention the final passive here, Numbing Traps. Enemies that you slow will have their damage reduced by 25% for 5 seconds. So this helps with pushing Greater Rifts. However, if you are not pushing Greater Rifts, and you are using the Fire Rune, then use Ballistics instead. This increases the damage of rockets by 100%, and again, it's only the Fire Rune that launches rockets. If you don't need all that extra damage, you're focusing on speed content, then you want to take Tactical Advantage. Whenever you use Vault, Shadow Power, or Smokescreen, you're going to gain a 60% move speed buff for 2 seconds. You want to take Hot Pursuit. Increases your move speed by 20% for 4 seconds when you hit an enemy. Then, in any circumstance, you can always work Awareness into the build. This gives you an extra life. If you're pushing Greater Rifts, then I'd substitute Numbing Traps for Awareness. But if you're playing solo, you'll have your follower with you, who's going to have his own Cheat Death passive to give you. Now, as for exactly what you want on every piece of gear. On your shoulders, Dexterity, Cooldown Reduction, Resource Cost Reduction, and Area Damage. Your helm, Dex, Crit Chance, Multishot damage, and then a Topaz for Resource Cost Reduction. In our amulet, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and then either Physical or Fire, depending on which rune you're using. For your gloves, Dex, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, Area Damage. Now I'll note that you're aiming for 37% cooldown reduction on your character. This will give you 100% uptime on your Vengeance when combined with the Dawn in the Cube. So if you have not reached that 37% cooldown reduction, then substitute Area Damage on your gloves for cooldown reduction. On your chest, Dexterity, Vitality, all resist, and then very important, the secondary, plus 12 max discipline. Do not ignore this. And then for the gems you're putting in your chest and pants, if you want more damage, go for emeralds for dexterity. If you want more toughness, go for diamonds for all resist. On your bracers, either physical or fire damage, dex, crit chance, and then life per hit. We're attacking very fast, and especially when your bracers are ancient, the life per hit adds up nicely. For our belt, Dex, Vitality, all resist, life percent. Pants, Dex, Vitality, all resist. Boots, Dex, Vitality, all resist, multi-shot damage. For our rings, crit chance, crit damage, and then if the ring is ancient, raw damage. If it's not ancient yet, you can stick with dexterity. Also, again, if you have not yet hit your cooldown breakpoint, you can get cooldown on the rings here. On your weapon, raw damage, dexterity, attack speed, and the Yang's resource cost reduction. And again, very important, the secondary plus 12 to max discipline. And on your quiver, dexterity, attack speed, crit chance, cooldown reduction, multi-shot damage, and the secondary max discipline. For your legendary gems, Zaeith's Stone of Vengeance. The further you are away from enemies, the more damage you deal to them, maxing out at 50 yards, which is the edge of your screen. This synergizes perfectly with Unhallowed Essence wanting you to play Keep Away. Then a Bane of the Trapped. You deal more damage to enemies under control impairing effects, which will be all the time thanks to our Thrill of the Hunt passive. So it's just a flat damage multiplier. Then lastly, for pushing Greater Rifts, and only for pushing Greater Rifts, a Bane of the Stricken. That's a flat 25% damage bonus to Rift Guardians, and every time you hit an enemy, you gain an incrementing damage bonus against that enemy. This is good for taking down single target, but again, just when you are pushing Greater Rifts. For speed content, you do not take a Bane of the Stricken. For that kind of content, you can take a Bane of the Powerful. Gain 20% increased damage after killing an elite pack, and you can eventually In speed content, maintain this buff 100% of the time after killing your first elite pack. It also gives you a flat 15% damage bonus against elites. Now, if you feel yourself having some trouble maintaining your squirts buff, you can swap in a Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. This is going to give you an absorb shield. In general though, between your smoke screen giving you invulnerability, between staying at the edge of the screen and your ultimate mobility, and between just obliterating everything so fast that it doesn't have a chance to harm you, your squirts shouldn't be falling off. If it does though, remove that Bane of the Powerful, put in the Molten Wildebeest. If however you're doing bounties or rifts, and you've actually dropped your Thrill of the Hunt, then you're not going to benefit too much from a Bane of the Trapped, so you can hold on to that Bane of the Powerful instead. Now, for your follower, for pushing greater rifts, you're going to want a Scoundrel. He just gives us the best buffs that work with our build. We're going to give him the Skeleton Key so that he can't die, and then we'll select the Powered Shot skill for a stun against enemies. That helps keep us alive. We'll take Anatomy to give us a crit chance buff. We're going to take Piercing Shot to give ourselves a 10% damage buff. And then if you want an extra life, you can go for Vanish. Otherwise, Knight's Veil basically turns our crit chance to 100%. Big damage buff. For the items we want to put on him, we want to prioritize the ones that help us. Nemesis Bracers have the Emanate effect. Shrines will spawn an enemy champion. These are treated like we're wearing them for purposes of the legendary power. Oculus Ring. Glowing circles will appear in the ground. Try to play hopscotch, stand in them, you're going to gain an up to 85% damage buff. Flavor of Time Amulet. Emanates to us. Pylon effects last twice as long, super powerful. Then, less important, well, depending. Homing pads, if you're playing hardcore, very important. Emanates to you, you can town portal out while taking damage and not get interrupted. Gloves of Worship emanates to us, shrine effects last for 10 minutes. Not as big as pylons, but still a nice little buff. Blind Faith for that 40% chance to blind. That's applying more crowd control to enemies. Similarly, Cord of the Shurma, chance to blind enemies, slow them. All of this helps us maintain our squirts buff. Ice Climber Boots to make him immune to freeze and immobilize effects. And then you want to stack Dexterity everywhere. All of his abilities scale off of Dexterity, so that is your main priority. For Paragon Points, you're going to max out your move speed. Then you're going to ideally want to get your total life pool up to about 750,000. That's more a matter of preference though. If you want to play riskier, you can just dump everything into Dexterity. If you want to play safer, you can dump everything into Vitality. We're recommending enough Vitality to get your life up to 750,000 for greater rift pushing. For offense, start by maxing out your cooldown reduction. Then crit damage and crit chance, you're going to want to maintain a global 10-to-1 ratio on your character before these are both maxed out. Then attack speed. For defense, all resist, armor, life percent, life regen. Utility, area damage, resource cost reduction, life per hit, and pickup radius. And that is going to wrap up this guide. But do stay tuned for more Diablo 3 guides, including an eventual Natalia's guide. Natalia got fully revamped for Season 28. We'll also have a tier list video on the best builds coming out, so stay tuned for all of that. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.